Hello, Guitar Smarts fans. Before you check out this podcast, I want to make you aware of a cool new place where you can interact with other Guitar Smarts listeners. It's a Facebook group called the Guitar Geek Hangout. That's where we hang out and talk about all things guitar. So, if you like the Guitar Smarts podcast, come and chat with Kiran and myself over in the Guitar Geek Hangout on Facebook. Maybe check out some pre-podcast clips and even get involved in asking and answering lots of questions from the other page dwellers. Hope to see you there. A lot of people, when they do gigs these days, they tend to use a PA for vocals only, and then the back line and the drums are responsible for their own sound reproduction. And that's a really simple and effective approach for a lot of bands to be able to then go out and gig. But if you take just an extra step to invest in some equipment, but most importantly, some knowledge as well and some skills, it'll improve your experience for, your audience in terms of the sound quality, but it'll also improve your own personal experience on stage. Greetings, welcome to the Guitar Smarts podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. This week, Kiran and I are discussing how easy or difficult it can be to improve your live sound if you're in a band. So, if you're in a band and maybe you do pubs and clubs, etc., you might be the kind of band that puts your vocals through the PA system and everything else is just backline. And that's an easy way of doing it, but there are a lot of advantages to taking a step up and trying to put a bit more of your sound through the PA and getting a bit more control. And that's what we're discussing this week. Now, this was a long old conversation, so we're breaking this into two parts. This week is part one. Next week, we'll give you the second part. And there's a lot of information in this, so it's probably helpful to break it down. Anyway, come and find us on our social media pages, the usual places, facebook.com/Guitar Smarts, and on Instagram, where you can find us at guitar_smarts. And remember, if you could, it would be really helpful if you could leave us a rating and a review in your favourite podcast app for this podcast. This helps us to get into the ears of other guitarists who are looking for guitar-related podcasts. Anyway, that's enough waffle from me. Let's get to it. Kiran!
Hey!
How you doing, mate? You well?
I'm superb, mate. I'm absolutely superb. Back to work with a bump this week after a lovely couple of weeks holiday with the fam.
Yeah.
But yeah, I must say it's not too bad because it's a 4-day week here in the UK because we had a bank holiday on the Monday. So yeah, I'm all good, mate, and got a couple of gigs this weekend. Both pub gigs, both within like a half an hour commute from home. So yeah, I'm looking forward to a couple of gigs with the band this weekend, and then chilling out on Sunday. And so yeah, I'm good, man. How about you? How's your week?
I'm good. You're gigging a lot at the moment, aren't you? You guys are a busy band. That's brilliant.
Well, it is brilliant. I tell you what, it's brilliant in terms of scratching that itch that was mounting like a painful thing during lockdown, right? Because I realized that through all of the podcasting we were doing and the talking about stuff, it was huge amounts of foreplay without actually being able to do what we were talking about, right? I mean, we were doing a lot of practicing and stuff at home, but this is a podcast for the gigging guitarist. And so the desire to get back out there was very much there. But I must say, I do hope I haven't bitten off more than I can manage. These guys are super cool guys, really, really friendly bunch, take their music very seriously. But more than that, they like to be out there and gigging a lot. So, I've kind of said to them, I will do as much as I can, but I think the expectation is to be out there as much as we can be. So yeah, hopefully it's going to work out. But yeah, we are gigging a lot. It's pretty much every weekend we've got a gig, and some weekends, Friday and Saturday. So, thankfully I've got a wife that's very understanding about it, but it's requiring a lot of diary management and a lot of communication and a lot of just trying to keep everything in check. So, let's see, but hopefully it will be it will be manageable. But yes, this band does love to gig, so I hope I can keep up with it with everything else that I've got going on in my life, because it's not my main day job. So
yeah, well, that's cool, man. I mean, I'm pleased for you. I mean, I couldn't gig to that frequency. 2 gigs in one weekend is too much for me. Yeah,
I think it's too much for me, to be honest. If and I've said to the guys, said I'd prefer to not gig, 2 on a weekend. But they're obviously keen keen to. I guess the luxury is we are a 5-piece band with 2 guitarists. And prior to me joining, it was a 4-piece with a very accomplished guitarist who is capable of doing the entire set just as one guitar. And he's able to gig very frequently as well, because he is basically a pro musician. So on the gigs that I can't make it, they can go out as a 4-piece, and that's not going to stop them from being out and gigging. But I think they do enjoy the sound and kind of additional guitar there that a rock band, with certain numbers does need. So it seems to all be working at the moment. But yeah, I've got to keep it in check so it doesn't dominate everything in life, because I'm not a pro musician, and I can't be out there every single weekend, 2-3 nights of the weekend.
Yeah.
So, but I asked to be out there and gigging, so I guess I got it.
There you are. That's cool, man. Because I'm finding it quite hard to kind of get. I'm not gigging again. I am gigging. I haven't got many. I've got 1 gig left in my diary, which is next week. Which is another wedding gig, and that one should be good fun because again, it's got keys and horns on it and stuff. So it's going to be plenty of people. Good. I can kind of, it's got a good set list for this one. Same band, same group of people again. But then that's it for me after that for the year, and then I know I'm going to get kind of sad that I'm not gigging again soon. I don't want to be out there playing, but I think what I'm going to do is turn my focus to other things and do some really focusing on my practicing and my playing and try and work hard to improve my playing, and then maybe next year look at starting up a band again properly, because I don't think there's much point don't think there's much point this year in me really trying to start something new or find a band that I can fit into. I think I want to spend the rest of the year just kind of really honing my guitar skills in a way that I haven't done for years. So that's my kind of thought process, I think, for the rest of the year. Not too worried about the gigs. I'm started rebuilding my rig again, not from scratch, just the pedal board. I'm kind of like, I think I'm actually going to move the TCI Electronic Nova system off because I've had some reliability issues, and it hasn't worked that well with my current amp setup as my previous one did when I had one a good few years ago. So I think I'm going to go to individual pedals again. But yeah, that's kind of excited about that, if I'm honest, because pedals are more fun. So.
they are more fun. They're more finicky and they're more temperamental, and just when you think you've dialed in the right sound for your board and got everything right, you'll go and set your board up in a different venue in a different environment, and you'll go, I thought I'd had the sweet spot and I didn't. I think we need to get you out there gigging and with the right band. We need to come up with a plan for this, Mr. Oliver.
Do you know, I want to go to some jam nights. Nights almost fill that hole for me if they're regular enough and good enough, of a jam night. Do you know what I mean? If I'm not gigging, I can go to a jam night once or twice a month and enjoy that plenty in terms of seeing live music and playing live,
That's true. Yeah. That's true.
So I want to get to a jam night soon and, see some people, play some guitar and get that kind of monkey off my back, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the jam night down here should be starting up again soon. So Damien Nodrick's infamous and amazing jam night at the local pub down here in Hampshire. So hopefully we'll be along to that soon. And maybe I think we should get loads of the guests of the show that have come on for interviews down there as well. Definitely. It'd be like a Guitar Smarts takeover of the Thursday jam, because there's so many people that we've interviewed and spoken to who are like, I can't wait to go to this jam. That'd be good.
That's a great idea. We should definitely do that. Can you imagine that being like just a load of fun? But anyway, shall we get on with this week's topic?
Yeah, let's.
It's a big one.
Oh man, I wonder if I've had enough coffee. I've definitely got my notepad at the ready. Today school is in session. Perfect timing because the schools have gone back and the kids have gone back to school this week. It's the start of the new school year, and class is in session with Professor Oliver today. I have much to learn from you, and I'm gonna try and keep up. But I'm probably going to ask a bunch of really dumb questions, but hopefully those will help me out and help out our listening audience for today's topic.
Yeah.
So how should we introduce what we're going to talk about today? Because you've written a brilliant agenda for us today.
Yeah, and then I've kind of got an introduction, but the impetus has really kind of come from a number of things, right? Our past experience being in a band together, and also more current situations. I think maybe with gigs that you do sometimes, and I think this is probably something that is maybe on the minds of quite a lot of people who are in pub bands and amateur bands at the moment, and it's to do with live sound, doing your own live sound. It's not easy to get right. It can be a challenge. So what most people tend to do is they take a simple approach to doing live sound, and what that means is that they'll use a PA system with a couple of speakers and a simple mixing desk to amplify their vocals only. If they've got a keys player, they'll probably put keys through as well. But if it's, say, and I'm going to preface this whole episode with, I'm looking at this really from the viewpoint of your average kind of 5-piece guitar band, 2 guitars, bass, drums, and a singer, maybe a couple of backing vocals as well. But a lot of people, when they do gigs these days, they tend to use a PA for vocals only, and then the back line and the drums are responsible for their own sound reproduction. And that's a really simple and effective approach for a lot of bands to be able to then go out and gig. But if you take just an extra step to invest in some equipment, but most importantly some knowledge as well and some skills, it'll improve your experience for your audience in terms of the sound quality, but it'll also improve your own personal experience on stage, which is important. So that's what we're talking about today. What I want to do is kind of impart a lot of my experience as a sound engineer to you and to our listeners, hopefully to maybe give them some more confidence to go out and plan to improve their live sound when they're out there gigging with their bands. One thing to mention as well, if you're a listener and you've already got a lot of knowledge on this and you already do a lot of these things and you've got other items of advice you'd like to add, then leave them in the comments on our social media pages or send us a message, and it's something that we can add into another podcast at another time.
That's great.
First thing I wanted to mention is obviously we talked about that kind of simplistic approach that a lot of bands take, which is, you put all your vocals through the PA and then your backline's responsible for being loud enough to amplify the venue.
So that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing at the moment, right? And this is why I'm so keen to have this chat with you today, because the band that I'm with, and they won't mind me mentioning this in this regard, because these are the conversations that I'm having with them at the moment, right? They're a really, really decent set of kind of semi-pro amateur musicians, right? They take their music really seriously. They play really, really well, and we're creating a decent sound, and the audience likes it. We get good feedback after every gig. People really enjoy it. But I know, having gigged with you for a number of years, where you transformed our last band by utilizing your knowledge of sound engineering to help us, get a much better front of house and on stage sound. I know how much that improves the overall, experience for not only the band playing, but also the audience. And we started getting comments in that band when we made those changes to say, the comments started changing from, wow, you guys are really good, to, wow, you guys are really good and you sound incredible, right? We used to start getting comments on the sound. And, I've done gigs with bands and played like with Damien Lodrick's band and things like that, where they take the sound and sound engineering even to the next level. And it's incredibly, high performance kit and professional, sound engineering setup that they're going out with. So I've experienced it, but now I feel, at least from a sound engineering perspective, I've gone right back to basics with this band, who are going out with a very rudimentary PA. Everything is backline driven, but that backline is also then the front of house sound for bass, guitars, the drum kit. The only thing we're running through the PA is the 3 vocal mics, and we've got 3 monitors pointing up at us so that we can hear our vocals. And now I think what the band is finding, with the addition of this extra guitarist with me and a new drummer who has a very good loud kit, and he's got dynamics in his playing. He's not just an obnoxiously loud drummer by any stretch, but it's a loud kit. They're now finding the overall onstage sound has gone up massively, which is making it difficult to be able to be comfortable on stage with sound in certain venues. But also, out the front, we're now getting discrepancies in the balance of sound because we've got, more instruments and different musicians playing at a louder volume. So I'm trying to impress upon them that there are some certain things that we need to do now that this band is in this format and this lineup with the setup that we've got, so we can get a better on-stage sound for us and we can have a more balanced sound out front for the audience. But it's going to require some time and some investment and maybe a little bit of equipment. And I think that's a scary journey for these guys. I'm not sure that there's the either the knowledge or the readiness yet to accept that and know what that entails. And that's why I thought it would be a really good topic for us to discuss today. And we could learn from all the knowledge that is how you could advise this type of band, a pub or festival band. But when we go and do festivals, all the sound engineering's taken care of. So this is just when we go out and do pubs and clubs that we need to figure out how to go from the setup we've got to getting a much better controlled sound. And my knowledge on this is basic, and from having watched you and other bands that I've been in, I've got a lot to learn. So where should we start, Matt?
Well, that's a really good question, and you mentioned some really good points about the disadvantages of taking that simplistic approach. Right, of having that vocals only and backline approach to your sound. If you're listening to this and you're wondering, well, we get along fine doing that. What's the problem? Well, the balance of your audio across the width of the venue can be really poor if you're putting all the pressure on the backline to do your sound reinforcement. Especially if you set up in a particular way so that if you've got both guitarists on one side of the stage, it's going to sound completely different over to one side than it will to the other. So you've got less control basically over your sound if you don't put everything through the PA. And I'm not saying you should put everything through the PA, but there are advantages to putting more things through the PA because then you've got a system that has control over the sound. That's a big disadvantage to having that vocals only through the PA and backline approach to doing sound. And again, you have an inability to correctly kind of EQ things and fix things for the room. A lot about sound engineering is really to do with making the instruments and the equipment you have kind of meet the room correctly, because the room has a big effect on the sound. You can't EQ a guitar amp for the room just from your guitar amp. You need, that's why a lot of people have graphic EQs on their board, is not actually just to use as a particular sound, but they use it as a kind of a utility tool for adjusting the sound to kind of meet the effects the room is having on the guitar sound. So these are things that you miss out on if you don't kind of put everything through a PA system. But I've created some steps to take.
Great.
And it's pretty comprehensive, but what I want to avoid is getting too technical. I don't want this to be a really dry podcast, but I want to cover things in such a way so that people can go away and feel confident enough to maybe try or look up more about these things. And who knows, maybe it'll help people to improve their experience for their audience and themselves going forward. But
brilliant.
The first thing you should do, absolutely top of the list, is just arm yourself with knowledge first and foremost. There's some fantastic books you can get which really spell things out to you simply. And this is how I learned really in the first case how to do live sound. Some of your biggest adversaries in getting good live sound are going to be things like battling feedback, performing effective and musical equalization on signals, and just understanding things like gain staging, which is really important. These aren't things that you should have some awareness of that before you go into doing live sound for a band. Try and read up on these things beforehand. That's step number one. There are some books that I really recommend as well. One is the Sound on Sound Guide to Live Sound, Optimizing Your Band's Live Performance Audio, and another one called just Basic Live Sound. They're both by the same author, a guy called Paul White, who is a long-standing and prolific author for Sound on Sound and for a lot of his own stuff. He's just a fantastic sound engineer, and he's written some really great books on how to do not just how to do live sound, but helping to explain simple principles about, the nature and the physics of audio. So that's the first thing I would recommend, is to just, before you think about changing your PA, getting new equipment, getting more microphones or anything like that, just do some reading and some studying on how, how you should do live sound, because you may even find that you can understand some things about the way you do things now. You can improve your sound even just, with your current setup enough to kind of make a valid improvement. One of the things that I bet you'll agree with this, one of the problems with not putting everything through the PA, and this kind of sounds counterintuitive, is and my experience is this as well, is bands tend to be too loud if they're not through a PA. Is that your feeling of it?
It is entirely my feeling, and it's a difficult, but I understand why you say the words counterintuitive, because I've been trying to explain this to some of the guys in the band who've only ever run this type of setup that we've discussed, that very rudimentary backline as the main driving force, and just vocals through the PA. And when they were starting to say, okay, well, this is great, we really like the lineup now that we've got and the sound that we're creating as an ensemble, but the overall on stage sound now is really loud. We're fighting against each other, and we keep seeming to notch up our sound. And I've said to them, well, the way round this is we need to be able to hear ourselves better. So we're not doing that. And the way to do that is to start running more of the instruments through the PA, working on our monitor mixes so that we can all hear what we need to. And then we can bring the overall level of the backline down, which is what we're standing right in front of. That's causing this issue. Yeah. But I think the natural interpretation of that is we're too loud, or it feels like we're too loud. So how does running the instruments through the PA and therefore creating more sound and more presence of those instruments, how does that then bring the volume down? And I think that's the piece that people are struggling with from a kind of, this sounds counterintuitive. If we're running the instruments through another set of speakers, we're going to be even louder, and it's going to be even more indistinct in terms of sound. And that's the bit that I'm trying to overcome.
Yeah, if you think about a big live venue, if you go and see a band somewhere like the O2, there's going to be a different sound engineer doing monitor mixes than there is a sound engineer doing front of house. You can kind of think of everybody's individual monitor mix as a separate front of house mix.
Exactly.
It's your own personal experience of the event, whether you have that in a wedge, whether you have it in in-ear monitors. That's why that's why the volume does come down when you have more stuff going through the PA, because you can afford to now bring your stage volume down, because there's nothing on stage that needs to be loud enough to present to the audience. The PA is taking care of that. So you bring your stage volume down, you can balance what each person in the band hears much better through their own monitor mix. And then the sound out front can be as loud or as quiet as you want.
Exactly.
Depending on drums, obviously. If you're in a venue where you're still somewhat depending on the acoustics of the drums to punch through. But you have to get to a pretty big venue these days for that to be a problem.
Yeah.
The first thing that you'll lose with drums is your kick drum when the venue starts getting, because that's all low end and thump. Big venues, it'll just get lost into a mesh, into a mush of what used to sound like a thump, but it just sounds like a woof almost, So you need something to punch out your kick drum. And, your singers and your band, you base your time feel off the backbeat of the drums, right? So you then need to introduce the snare drum as well. So, if you're doing sound for a band and you want to improve things, you want to mic everyone up in the band, and ideally the kick drum and the snare as well. Everything else, really, your toms and your cymbals, hi-hat, they'll probably come through enough anyway. So you don't have to do much. You don't have to have overheads, every tom mic'd up. Just kick and snare is enough for most places that are bigger than a pub. To improve your sound. And if you're just playing pubs, would you just? My thought was just to mic up the kick, if nothing else.
Just to get a little bit more thump.
Add a bit more thump, a bit more, just that feel that people have in their chest when dance music playing. You want a bit of that coming through as well. But the main problem you're going to have with guitarists, guitar-orientated bands, is that those amps are going to get too loud too quickly. They're going to overcome the vocals. You're going to end up with a poor balance of sound on stage. You're going to end up with problem out front all the night, in the sense that if people are notching up, if you notch up your guitar amp because partway through the other guy's notched his guitar amp, then he's going to notch his up again maybe at some point, or the bassist is, and before you know it, the main thing that the audience is listening to, which is the vocals, that's the main thing 90% of the time most people are listening to, is the person singing, because that's how they know a song.
Exactly.
At some point they're not going to be able to hear it.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't happen intentionally. That's the other thing to say. It's what I've experienced is it's often like you'll do a sound check and everyone's kind of listening and concentrating on the sound to get the right balance and being, professionally restrained, etc. And then as the gig progresses and the drummer starts to really get into things and lay into his kit a little bit more, things just start to be a little bit more energetic and lively. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, hold on a minute, we're a lot louder than we were in sound check. So I better notch up a little bit because I'm nowhere near loud enough. And then, so the other guitarist goes, oh, he's turned up. Yeah. Because now I can't hear myself and everyone's getting louder and the singer's starting to shout a bit more and scream a little bit more, but it's because he can't hear himself anymore. And it creates this domino effect where you're just constantly notching up, which is a discipline to try not to do that, because it just creates a perpetual effect.
You're trying to adjust your sound for your own personal experience on the stage, though, right?
Yeah.
I want to hear myself slightly louder now that the dynamics changed. But the problem is that now everyone can hear you louder. The whole venue can hear you louder, and that's affecting the balance everywhere. If you have your own monitor mix, then you can just turn the volume up of yourself in your own monitor mix. That doesn't affect the sound on stage. That doesn't affect the sound on the front of house. It might affect the sound on stage, but for your own personal monitor mix, which is in a wedge pointing at you. And then you shouldn't have the same reactions from people on stage having to turn themselves up. The point is that you're not affecting the balance at the front of house. And if your stage volume is already low, then you're probably going to have to have, you're not going to have it as loud anyway to hear yourself, and therefore it's not going to affect front of house or the stage balance anyway. So there's huge advantages to having things going through the PA, and it is because of the control you get over the sound. Once you're putting everything through a PA, you just have ultimate control of how things should sound. And that's really important in some venues where it's actually quite difficult to get a good sound.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you're potentially going to be playing quite a small venue tonight.
Tonight is reputed to be a very small but popular little rock pub, which apparently it's kind of infamous because people come out in their droves to hear rock bands, but it's a tiny little venue, almost laughably small. So I'm intrigued to see how small and tiny this venue is going to be.
Yeah.
But the thoughts of trying to get a good sound tonight are just I'm almost given up before we've started. I think it's just going to be, let's just see how restrained we can be in this venue.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not going to be too bad, but actually sometimes in small venues like that, it's good to have a little simple approach to it, kind of a get in, get out approach, and if people just like a good rock band, then just go and do the thing. But if you're playing a venue that's maybe a little bit bigger, maybe high up on a stage, if you're high up on a stage and you've got your guitar on say a seat, a chair to get it so that you can hear it well, it's going to be above the heads of people that are on the dance floor. So you're going to have no control. You're going to lose control over your front of house sound at the kind of cost of trying to make things sound good on stage.
The other thing to say as well is when you're playing venues like this where space is at a premium, and if you're trying to run like particularly guitars and even bass through the back line, maybe to a lesser extent bass, but what I've noticed and forgotten about because I haven't run this setup for a long time with bands is you end up obscuring the cabinets that you're standing in front of. You're literally on top of your amp, so you're standing in front of it, and it's kind of like, well, that's the sound that the audience is hearing out front, but because the venue's so small, you've got no other option apart from to stand in front and almost on top of your speaker cab. So who's hearing what? It's just, so
you can't hear yourself. I mean, if you've ever done a gig, and I'm sure you have, and I've done plenty, where you got no choice but to stand right in front of your own speaker, and it's at your feet. You can barely hear yourself, but then you might walk out onto off the stage to where people are and you're loud, and you think this is frustrating because I can't hear myself, but I know I can't come up because I'm going to be too loud for people.
That's it.
That's exactly when you want your amp to be mic'd up with some fold back from a wedge or in-ear monitors that is feeding back just for you. You're on sound at a level that, means you can hear yourself perfectly and other people, but it's not going out front, it's coming to you.
That's it. That's it.
I wanted
so go on. I was going to say, well, how do we start getting stuff through the PA? Is that what you wanted to talk about next, or were you going to take us in a different direction?
Well, yeah, I wanted to talk about equipment, really.
Great. Great. That's it.
What equipment? So you're in a band that currently does this more simplistic approach with less control over the sound. What equipment do you have? Right.
So it's good backline equipment in terms of the guitar amps and the bass cabs and all of that. Everyone's got decent enough gear, but the PA itself is a fairly rudimentary 12-channel mixing desk with a power amp, and then two 15-inch top PA speakers. We're not using a sub, but these speakers, the 15-inch, they could EQ'd properly. They could probably kick out a decent amount, but yes, obviously it would be nice to have a sub. And then we've got three monitors, one for myself, for my vocal mic, one for the lead singer, and then one for the bass player who does backing vocals as well, like myself. And that's it. So in terms of equipment, it's as basic as you could get for a 5-piece band to go out and gig with. So my first thoughts, and this is where I may have got things totally wrong, right? My first thoughts are, well, why don't we DI the bass? And the bass player's already got a monitor in front of him, so we could give him his bass through the monitor as well as out front. And why don't we mic up both guitar cabs and have those coming through the monitors as well? And then we can get a better blend out front because we are running the guitar cabs one either side of the drummer, so stage left and stage right. So depending on where you're sat as an audience member out front, at the moment you're already getting an imbalanced sound depending on if you're sitting in front of my guitar cab or the other guitarist. So that was my first thoughts, to try and lower the overall stage volume and get a better balance out front, and just take some time to sound check that setup and the monitor mixes at a gig. But that's as far as my knowledge has gone really with the setup that we've got. So that's that. So what would you do in this instance?
That there's a lot of merit in that approach that you've mentioned there, because what you're trying to do is approach the problem of bringing the stage volume down, of not having to, not that you won't have to make volume adjustments, it's just that what you're doing is you're setting the source of your tone, your guitar amplifier in your rig, you're setting it in such a way that you won't have to change it again. You won't have to increase the volume of it on stage, because if the people in the audience need to hear it more, you can increase the volume of it on the desk. Okay. Yeah. And if you need to hear it more, you can increase the volume of it in your monitor mix.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're not having to increase the volume of the actual amplifier itself.
That's right.
Which is something that, more people will hear on stage. If you've got your own wedge in front of you, you're going to hear that really well at a lower volume than your amp, because your amp's going to be set lower anyway, because it's not having to do front of house sound. You can keep your amp set relatively low, have it mic'd up, and then bulk of what you hear can come from your monitor mix. So that's a really good approach. You don't have to do much investment in terms of equipment. It's just maybe some more mics, some more cables, some more stands.
Yeah.
I'd always recommend, where possible, having a mic on a cabinet on a stand so that it's facing the speaker properly, like you would face a mic. You would never really sing across a microphone. You would sing into it, because that's hitting the full diaphragm with the sound. You get more detail, you get more across the full frequency spectrum. So invest in some short mic stands, put the mic properly in front of your speaker. Some people just hang the mic in front of a speaker. That's not too bad. To be fair, you can buy some microphones that are side access in terms of the sound anyway. So your Sennheiser E906 mics, which is what a lot of sound engineers use for guitars, they're side presentation mics anyway, which means...
So I've bought a couple of extra SM58s just because they're handy, a good all-rounder. I know people normally use 57s for guitar cabs and things, and I'm not sure why. I guess it's just based on the responses and frequencies it handles, and maybe it's a better choice for miking up cabs. I don't know.
There's no real difference. No difference really between a 57 and a 58, other than the capsule's either surrounded by a large pop shield within that kind of mesh frame on a 58. 57's really still the same microphone, but without that around it, so you can get it closer. So you can get it about an inch closer to anything, a 57. So it's really the same microphone. There's no real difference.
There you go. Okay.
So, but if you've got a pocket full of SM58s or that type of dynamic microphone, you can use that for everything. That's great. You can use that for vocals. You can use it for your snare drum. You can use it for your amplifiers as well. DIing the bass is a really good idea. And you'll probably find that most bass amplifiers have a DI output anyway. So if the sound of the amp is really integral to your bass player's tone, then I would say turn the volume of the amp down on stage. They still use the amp for their own tone, but then use the DI output from the amp to go into the desk. And then it's just like miking it up, really.
Would you ever DI a guitar cab?
It depends. So there are some amplifiers that have DI outputs on, that Tech 21 amp I used to have, that Trademark 60, that's got a DI out, which has got cab simulation built in. But I would never DI a guitar amp that didn't have proper line level output like that. Because it should have cabinet simulation. It should have, the right audio level. Don't ever just take the speaker out and plug it straight into the desk. That will just, that's high ampage, low voltage to drive a speaker, not the kind of signal that a desk is looking for. So I would always try and mic it up, but try, if you've got a direct out on your amplifier, that's a good thing to do as well. Maybe you use a amplifier on stage to amplify like a Helix type setup. Maybe you've got a Line 6 Helix or something where you're getting all your tones off a floorboard. You could just do an XLR out from your floorboard straight into the desk. And then, you can have your sound that way. That's another good way of doing it. So having enough mic inputs on your desk to be able to then, connect enough mics to pick up sound from the different amplifiers is going to be the first big step you need to take, really, to improve your sound on stage.
Nice. Now when you were doing this for Roadrunner, our previous band, what I noticed you doing once you'd helped us set it all up, and it was a similar type of arrangement to that which you've just described. Did we DI the bass in that, or did we just was it just the guitars we were putting through? You were DIing the bass as well. I used to notice you were able to do a lot of this just with a set of headphones and the desk. You were listening for a lot of the kind of was that just a line test that you were doing through those headphones? What were you doing when you were just listening through and testing everything out through headphones before we then went to sound check?
Well, do you know what? That's a really good question, and I've made some notes actually about this. It's absolutely imperative if you're going to take this approach to doing sound engineering properly on your gig and getting things going through a PA. You must do everything through headphones before it goes through front of house first. Right. Because the reason for that is you get to isolate those different sources in your ears first without the room being taken into account. So you should be thinking, once you've got your PA set up and you've got things mic'd up and you're about to do, your line checks, as you just mentioned, making sure that microphones and sources are working, you shouldn't be doing that through the speakers. You should be doing that into headphones that you listen to, because then you can hear things that won't be apparent through the speakers, especially if you're in an ambient room with maybe some fans going in the ceiling or air conditioning or something, people talking, glasses clinking. You're not going to be able to hear things like buzz that you might need to EQ out, or some high-pitched noises that are coming from an amplifier that you might want to EQ out slightly. You're not going to hear the full balance of the sound. You're not going to think, I need to EQ this amplifier slightly because it's a bit too mid-heavy or something. You're going to want to listen to each thing individually and really make a judgment out of your own feel. Musicians probably don't trust themselves enough when it comes to recognizing when something sounds good or sounds bad. We've all spent a lifetime listening to music. We know what things we like the sound of. We know what things we don't like the sound of. We know when something sounds tinny. We have ways of describing things that, we all agree are good indications of whether something sounds good or bad. So you should be using headphones to isolate your ears from all the things that detract from that sound. And then you make an assessment, you EQ your guitar sound. It sounds great in the headphones. I'm going to put it through the front of house now and see how it sounds out the front of house. Sounds slightly different out the front of the house. So maybe I need to add a little more bottom end. So you're starting to adjust, but having headphones is imperative to that because of it gives you the opportunity to really listen in isolation to each individual source. You should do all your mixing through headphones before you then put anything to speakers. Same with once you've finished sound checking everything individually, you should be trying to mix the sound of the band's front of house mix in your headphones first. Get it sounding a bit like you're listening to a CD. I can hear the drums great here. I've got my guitarist pan left and right, so I've got a nice little stereo spread going there. I've got the main vocalist middle. I'm going to pan the two backing vocalists left and right as well. So in my earphones now, I've got a nice little mix of everything. Regardless of how loud it is in your headphones, you want the mix of everything to be just right. And then send that to the front of house, because then now it should just be a case of how loud do I want the front of house to be? The mix is right. Yeah. And do I just want it to be louder or quieter than it happens to be? So that's why you should have headphones, because it's the detail you're looking for using headphones.
Yeah, really good advice, mate. Really good advice. I think the more as I'm listening to you and talking through some of this stuff, the more I'm appreciating, obviously, why it's such a skill and such a wonderful thing to be able to have a sound engineer out with you if you're gigging, because all of these things are like they know all of this stuff and they know how to do this. Because when you did all of this for us in our previous band, you did it in a very chilled out, very relaxed way. There was no stress with it, and obviously this is knowledge you've accrued and a sensibility that you've accrued to do this that comes almost as second nature. And I think that's something that, as I'm listening to you going, right, I've got to remember this, and we've got to work through all of these steps. I'm realizing this is quite a level of detail and quite not a daunting thing, but it's something that we've got to remember to do in a kind of nice sequential way to get it right. It's not a case of just miking up the guitar cabs, chucking them through the PA and turning the sliders up to see what happens, because it's a bit more nuanced than that.
Thank you so much for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it this week. Remember, this is a 2-part podcast talking about live sound, so the next part will be out next week, where we'll conclude our discussions on doing live sound for your band. Anyway, find us on our social media pages. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram, and remember to leave a rating or a review for the podcast in your favourite podcast app. That really helps. Anyway, take care. Have a good week.